Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesinger.
And I'm Jeanelle Slade. The bitter cold moving in for another hit to our region, and this wave will bring the coldest temperatures yet.
Taking a live look from our iCam, it warmed up today and we got a break from the snow for a while, but it's coming down again. This is a very temporary reprieve, though, as more wicked winter weather is on the way.
Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire joining us now. Bob, it's safe to say that March is going to come in like a lion. What are we going to expect?
He's going to be very upset, lion, too, because you remember the snowflakes we had last a couple of days. Well, they are back. Look at this. The Doppler radar shows you snow now moving into south central Montana, Yellowstone County, and as you just saw, now starting to make its way into the Billings area. And there's more snow where that came from, so we are expecting some more snow to move in tonight. Here's what all of our computer models all put together say. You'll notice here, I think here in the Billings area, they're going to range anywhere from about 2 to maybe 6 inches of snow. But I like the one in the middle, probably right around 4 inches of snow for the Billings area. I think that's what you're going to look at. And then you'll notice there's been a very snowy February. In fact, this is the third snowiest February on record. We're at 26.7 inches of snow, not including what we may get tonight. Last year was the second snowiest on record, and the snowiest on record was in 2014, where we got to 37 inches of snow. We'll have more in your forecast for the weekend, which is very cold, coming up in a few more minutes.
All right, thanks, Bob.
Well, over in western Montana, residents in the Rattlesnake neighborhood of Missoula are on high alert.
All the snow piling up has led to an urban avalanche warning in the Mount Jumbo area. And around noon today, witnesses watched a slide near the Missoula International School. Now, the school decided to not allow any students outside and contacted the Missoula Avalanche Center for advice.
Although there was no immediate threat to the building, today's incident was an all too clear reminder of what happened 5 years ago.
5 years ago today, a deadly avalanche swept a two-story home off its foundation, burying 3 people alive in the lower Rattlesnake.
Now, the brunt force of that avalanche crushed the home at the base of Mount Jumbo back in 2014. A couple in the home and an 8-year-old boy were buried alive. Dozens of rescuers and neighbors desperately dug for the victims at night using shovels, avalanche probes in their hands. Now,
the boy was found about an hour after the slide in good condition. The man, former UM professor Fred Allendorf, was found alive in an air pocket created by a fallen chimney. His wife, 68-year-old Michelle Colville, was located some 3 hours after the avalanche. She was also found alive in an air pocket, but critically injured and died a few days later. Authorities say that slide was triggered by a snowboarder. A lawsuit filed by the family of a man who was shot and killed by a Billings police officer back in 2014 has been settled. Richard Ramirez was shot by Officer Grant Morrison during a traffic stop on the Billings South Side. A coroner's inquest held the next year determined Morrison was justified in shooting Ramirez. And a year later, in 2016, the Ramirez family filed a suit against Morrison, the city of Billings, and Police Chief Rich St. John. Now, the case was scheduled for a jury trial that would have begun on Monday, but the case was settled out of court this week. While the terms have not been released, the family's attorney, J.R. Casillas, tells Q2 tonight there was a financial settlement reached. He also told us while he would have liked to take the case to trial, the family felt it was time for closure. Billings Assistant Administrator Kevin Iflin says city officials looked at the realities of civil cases and the cost of the case moving forward and decided to agree on the deal. He says the city stands by the original verdict from the coroner's inquest. The bill that would help the One Big Sky project will soon be introduced in the state legislature. The sponsor of that bill met over the phone with several groups from Billings. Q2's David J. joins us now with more from the man that's leading this project. David.
Well, Jeanelle, Russ, the bill would help more than Billings and would be a statewide economic development plan. Big Sky Economic Development Executive Director Steve Arviscow says the current statewide plan was written 20 years ago. What started with One Big Sky will now benefit the whole state if passed. State Senator Roger Webb, along with Arviscow, the Downtown Billings Alliance, Billings Chamber of Commerce, the City of Billings, and the Tourism Business Improvement District met on the phone for more than 2 hours today. Arviscow says private companies would make the initial investment, which would bring in more tax revenue that would reimburse the companies later for the infrastructure.
We're really focused on building a statewide economic development tool. Yes, we did the homework in Billings for this tool, but now really we have to open this up to the whole state. And so the legislation is called Statewide Economic Impact Districts, is about creating a new economic development tool for communities throughout the state of Montana.
And Steve Arviscow says the drafter expects to have the bill ready by the middle of next week, and it should be able to be introduced in the legislature by the end of the week. Russ?
All right, thank you, David. A trio of bills that would restrict how and when the state can require vaccinations against childhood diseases went down in defeat Thursday on the floor of the Montana House. As MTN's Mike Dennison reports, the hot-button subject sparked some emotion-charged and even confrontational debate on the House floor.
The three bills took different approaches toward the same basic goal: allowing more people in Montana to claim religious or medical exemptions from having their kids vaccinated against childhood diseases like measles, mumps, or chickenpox. The first bill, from Republican State Representative David Dunn of Kalispell, would make it easier for people to claim those exemptions. Two other bills from Republican Teresa Manzella of Hamilton would prevent the state from enforcing required vaccines for kids in foster care families or daycare centers. Dunn said it's simply an issue of freedom, and that vaccines cause many more problems than are reported.
The medical-industrial complex has failed to protect our nation's children, and parents in popular culture bully people who disagree on the topic.
Manzella said potential foster care families in Montana are being ruled out because they may object to the ingredients of some vaccines.
I'm really having a tough time believing that I'm standing here on the House floor of the great state of Montana reporting to you that the cells of aborted babies are in our vaccines. The cells of aborted babies.
Republican Greg DeVries of Jefferson City likened these babies to lab rats, prompting a formal objection from House Democratic leader Casey Schreiner.
We need to be better, Mr. Chair. Inappropriate. We object.
DeVries finished by saying citizens should not be compelled to inject vaccines into their bodies. The bills drew universal opposition from House Democrats and from some Republicans as well.
I remember losing friends, little people, because they didn't have a vaccine to protect them. They lived in iron lungs, and then they died. I do not want to live through an epidemic that our families went through.
We've been able to eradicate most childhood diseases. The facts are irrefutable. The safety of our state is at risk right now, considering what's going on in the state of Washington. It's our responsibility to make sure that our children are safe.
In the end, the bills failed by wide margins. 60-40 was the closest vote on the foster care bill, and 68-32 the biggest margin on the child care bill. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
The legislature reaches its halfway point this week, and then we'll take a several-day break until late next week.
Well, tonight Q2 is diving into the epidemic of stolen cars in our community. In fact, you or someone you know has likely fallen victim.
Now, that is because Billings ranks high nationally when it comes to stolen vehicles. Here's Q2's Andrea Lutz with a preview of tonight's special investigation. Andrea?
Russ and Jeanelle, Billings police say every year hundreds of vehicles are stolen within our city limits. This epidemic keeps officers pretty busy, as you can imagine. But what might surprise you is this. Many of them are recovered. Still, it does take a toll on victims. So tonight we hear from Billings police, who reveal the motive behind this grand theft epidemic. We also meet a family who says they could have had a lot taken away when their vehicle was stolen. They say, though, that the whole community needs to step up and change this trend.
You know, we're going to pay higher insurance premiums because of how many cars are stolen in Billings, Montana. We're going to pay because we lose property. We're going to pay because now we have to buy security systems. So we're going to pay either way.
So we do have some alarming statistics to share with you tonight on how our local law enforcement officer they respond to this stolen car epidemic. All of it's coming up, of course, tonight in my special investigation.
And you said that most of those stolen cars are recovered. About how many?
Yeah, it's interesting. About 80% of the vehicles that are stolen in our city, hundreds of vehicles, are recovered. So the Street Crimes Division with the Billings Police Department, they are in charge of tracking down those things and recovering those. Still, as you can imagine, it takes a huge toll on those victims as they wait sometimes years to get their vehicle back. So we'll have all that.
All right. Thanks, Andrea. Well, coming up on tonight's 5:30 News, the Bozeman Airport is looking to spread its wings even more. Find out what's being done.
And in sports, the chase continues for that coveted ticket to next week's state tournament. Scott shows us how divisionals are unfolding.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Breen. This is the 530 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.